Speaker of the House Paul Ryan steps down. The Trump probe pushes the president toward precipitous action. And James Comey's book is a-coming. We'll have all of it. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. So we do have a lot to get to today, and we'll get to all of it in just a second. First, I want to say thanks to our sponsors over at LegalZoom. So it is a fact of life. Attorneys are really, really expensive. I know, because I am one. You're likely to pay around $300 an hour for even a mediocre to decent attorney. There is just one reason why smart business owners turn to LegalZoom. Over 2 million Americans have used LegalZoom to start their businesses with LLCs, incorporation, and more. But even after your business is set up, LegalZoom can still help you out. Things like lease agreements, changing tax laws, contract reviews. All of these things are part of owning your own business, as you know, if you own your own business. But these are precisely the kinds of legal hurdles that take time and money away from growing your own business, which is why LegalZoom has actually created something new. It's called their Business Legal Plan. With it, you get legal advice for your business from vetted independent attorneys and tax professionals available in every state. You also receive access to NDAs, lease agreements, and more. And the best part is that you're not going to get charged by the hour, since LegalZoom is not actually a law firm. So you're not going to be shelling out $2,000 for a contract when you don't have to. Instead, you pay just one low upfront price. Check out LegalZoom's business legal plan at LegalZoom.com now and get special savings when you enter Ben at checkout. LegalZoom.com and enter Ben at checkout. LegalZoom is where life meets legal. LegalZoom.com. And again, enter code Ben at checkout, and you can check out some special savings on their business legal plan. It really is fantastic because, you know, for most of the time LegalZoom's been around, you've really been using it for wills and trusts in sort of simple forms, but now you can actually use it for legal advice itself and around those law firms and save yourself time and money. LegalZoom.com and use that promo code Ben at checkout for some special savings and also to let them know that we sent you. Okay, so Speaker of the House Paul Ryan is now out. And what's been fascinating to see is how the left and how the media have reacted to Paul Ryan leaving. So for a long time, they were looking at Paul Ryan as though he was the future of the party. He was the alternative to Trump. And there were a lot of people who were thinking that this was a Trump-Ryan battle. That was the battle that really mattered. Now, listen, President Trump won the presidency, and that battle ended in a certain way with a rapprochement, which is that President Trump was going to be the attitude of the party, and Paul Ryan was going to be the idea man of the party. And that's essentially how things worked for the first year. Because let's be real, most of Trump's sort of heretical priorities, you know, the things like trade wars or infrastructure plans, those things didn't go anywhere with Paul Ryan in the House. The stuff that actually did move were some regulatory reform measures, were the tax cuts, the attempt to restructure entitlements in the tax bill, right? All of that was Paul Ryan stuff. So what you actually got was Paul Ryan type governance in many areas and Donald Trump style rhetoric. That was the sort of agreement that Republicans came to. But with Ryan out, now what you're seeing is an attempt to recast this entire battle as a battle between Ryan and Trump, even though Ryan was actually pushing a lot of Trump's priorities and Trump was signing a lot of Ryan's priorities. That doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. And this misread, I think, is an attempt to paint everyone in the Republican Party as sort of beholden to everything bad about Trump. See, this is the goal of the left now. So the left tried to do this in 2016 by calling everybody a deplorable who supported President Trump. Now what they're attempting to do is they're attempting to say that anyone who even tangentially worked with President Trump actually made a Faustian bargain with President Trump. This is the tenor of the media coverage. And I don't think that that's correct. I don't think it's a Faustian bargain at all to say, listen, I don't like President Trump's character. I don't like what he's been doing on character, but I like a lot of his policy. That doesn't seem like a Faustian bargain at all. That seems like normal politics on a pretty daily basis in Washington, D.C., where everybody sucks and where the politics is what matters in the end. The policy is what's supposed to matter in the end. But Paul Ryan was asked about this by Jake Tapper. Tapper on CNN said to Ryan, did you make a Faustian bargain with President Trump?
I'm really proud of the accomplishments we have here. And so I don't see this as some Faustian bargain, devil's bargain, or whatever it is you call it. I see it as the country said, go fix these problems. You guys get the majority in the House. You get the majority in the Senate. Here's the presidency. Now go do something with it. That's what we're doing. That's not devil's bargain. That's actually doing what the people in this country asked us to do and keeping our word. And I'm very proud of that fact.
I mean, I'm wondering what exactly the media mean when they say things like devil's bargain. Do they mean that Paul Ryan has not been critical of Trump on character grounds? Because that's not true. Do they mean that Paul Ryan has sometimes soft-pedaled those character criticisms in order to get policy done? Maybe that's true, but he's also working with a Republican. He's working with a president in his own party, and he has to keep his eye on the prize when it comes to policy making, which, after all, is his job as Speaker of the House. Tapper continued to push Ryan on this on CNN yesterday, saying, does Trump embarrass you?
I know after the Access Hollywood tape came out in October 2016, Mr. Trump was asked not to appear at an event for you. Now it's back in the news in a major way. This must bother you. Access Hollywood, Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal, at a certain point, it must be embarrassing.
Well, look, I didn't even read the article. I mean, I'm obviously familiar with what you're talking about. So we're pretty focused on just getting our work done here. And so this is something that I'll let you guys speculate about. Right now, I'm busy trying to get things done in Congress. We've got a big agenda here. And so that's kind of where my focus is. And I don't really have much punditry to offer you on this. And look, I just think the way the president ought to handle this is compartmentalize it and focus on doing your job. We've got issues with Syria. We've got a balanced budget amendment we're passing this week. We've got a lot to do, and that's what I'm focused on.
So here's what's hilarious about this. Basically, if you're Paul Ryan and you're just a guy who's trying to get an agenda through, you're just trying to get some things done, you're getting ripped by the right as somebody who's not sufficiently supportive of President Trump, even while you're pushing President Trump's agenda, and you're being ripped by the left for not going out there and ripping Trump every day. Well, for Paul Ryan and for a lot of other Congress people who I'm talking to in Congress, Trump is not the top of their priority list. They weren't elected 10, 15, 20 years ago to be beholden to Trump, nor were they elected 10, 20, 30 years ago in order for them to shift their entire schedule of their day around reacting in the media to what President Trump does, either negative or positive. And so, you know, when Paul Ryan says, listen, I'm going to keep my nose to the grindstone and do what I'm supposed to do, he gets ripped on both sides. It's pretty astonishing. It's pretty astonishing. And I think Meghan McCain made a really good point yesterday. So Meghan McCain obviously is John McCain's daughter. And yesterday on The View, there were a bunch of people who were, all the left was cheering Paul Ryan leaving as Speaker of the House. They say, oh, it's just so great that Paul Ryan is out because Paul Ryan is a shill and Paul Ryan hasn't stood up to Trump and all the rest of this stuff. All these same Democrats who never stood up to Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton one iota. And now it's about Paul Ryan who didn't stand up to Trump, even though during the election cycle, Paul Ryan actually did stand up to then candidate Trump in the middle of the election cycle and disinvited him from a particular event after the Access Hollywood tape and told all the members of his Republican caucus that he wasn't going to be openly campaigning for Trump up till the election. Right? But this was not enough for the folks on the left. They say that, you know, they're really happy that Ryan is going. And Meghan McCain makes a good point. She says, listen, if Ryan is not sufficient for you in terms of his sort of tenor, then why exactly wouldn't people vote for President Trump?
Though, what do you want? If Paul Ryan isn't good enough and people, but that's not logical. We shouldn't want that. We live in a democracy. We should want two healthy parties debating against each other. But if Paul Ryan is the greatest sin, this is how we got Trump. Because if Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney and people like this are the worst kind of politicians, then you deserve Trump. Because he's not. He's a truly decent man that was trying to fight for democracy and conservative ideals. And now what's going to be left, I have no idea.
Okay, good for Meghan McCain. This is exactly right. What Meghan McCain is saying here is exactly right. You know, the left sits around, they wonder, how did we get Trump? How did we get Trump? By calling Paul Ryan the worst, by calling Mitt Romney the worst, by suggesting that people who were decent were actually bad. And then you know what the right did? They said, well, maybe it was their decency that lost them the election. Maybe what we need is an indecent man who punches in order to win an election. And then Trump won on exactly that basis. And then you're wondering why the right has resonated to President Trump? You're seeing this sort of coverage across the spectrum from folks on the left. Tim Alberta, who actually used to work at National Review, so he's not a left-winger, but he writes now for Politico, and he has a whole article called The Tragedy of Paul Ryan. He began as a Jack Kemp conservative. He ended as Donald Trump's man on Capitol Hill. That's not remotely true. He was not Donald Trump's man on Capitol Hill. He was trying to push against a lot of Trumpian priorities. It was Paul Ryan who was attempting to end around Mitch McConnell and get some actual things done. Now, again, I'm not a huge advocate of Paul Ryan as Speaker of the House. I don't think Paul Ryan was the best Speaker of the House in the world. I don't think that he was the worst Speaker of the House in the world. I think he was better than John Boehner. I think he was worse than Newt Gingrich. And I think he's somewhere in the middle. But this newfound attempt to paint Ryan leaving as anything but Ryan leaving because he doesn't want to be blamed for a blue wave that is not his fault is, I think, revisionist history on both sides. So on the left, they're saying Paul Ryan is leaving because Trump has taken over the party. On the right, they're saying Paul Ryan is leaving because Trump has taken over the party. I don't think any of that is true. I mean, that's why President Trump was praising Paul Ryan yesterday, because in President Trump's view, correctly, Paul Ryan was an ally in helping him push some of his political priorities. But here's the article from Tim Alberta at Politico. He says, Paul Ryan came to Congress as a Jack Kemp conservative and will depart as a Donald Trump Republican. It's more complicated than that, certainly. History requires nuance and texture, but legacies are reductive by nature. The House Speaker announced his retirement Wednesday, closing a messy and mesmerizing chapter in the history of the Republican Party. And for the affable Wisconsin kid who moved to Washington a quarter century ago, eager to make his mark on fiscal policy, the harsh reality is that he might be remembered more for accommodating the impulses of the 45th president than for crafting a generational overhaul of the tax code. This is a political obituary of Ryan's own writing. His silence in the face of Trump's indignities and his observance of the exquisite presidential leadership, a line that will live in infamy, would be less remarkable had he not first established himself as one of Congress's good guys, someone whose sense of principle and decency informed his objections to Trump's candidacy in the first place. Indeed, the Speaker's habit of turning a blind eye to the president's behavior is relevant and revelatory because it was not always so. There was hardly a tougher Trump critic during the 2016 campaign than Ryan, who felt duty-bound to combat the candidate's dark rhetoric and the party's nativist drift. Yet there has hardly been anyone softer on Trump since Election Day than Ryan, who felt duty-bound to deliver on the policy promises made to voters and decided that doing so meant ignoring the ad hominem savaging of private citizens, the hush money paid to porn stars, the attacks on private companies, the attempts to delegitimize institutions, and the innumerable other acts for which Barack Obama would have been impaled by the right. This was Paul's deal with the devil, a phrase used by several of the Speaker's confidants in the days following Trump's shocking triumph. So, again, the idea here from some of these folks is that presumably, I guess, the idea is that Paul Ryan should have been out front all the time, spending his time ripping on President Trump. This would have pleased a lot of the folks on the left. Now, listen, I'm in the business of political commentating. This is what I do for a living. And so one of the things I'm able to do is when I think Trump has done something wrong, I will rip him for it. And when I think President Trump does something right, I will praise him to the skies. And this is something that I am able to do. But I also am not in the position of having to negotiate with President Trump over policy. So to pretend that Paul Ryan's sole job was to comment on President Trump's doings day in and day out is to ignore the role of the legislature in the process. Now, I think if Paul Ryan committed any great sin, it was not standing up to Trump and McConnell on policy, not even on Trump's character. Listen, would I prefer that all Republicans played the same fiddle that I'm playing? Sure. I would prefer that when Donald Trump does something bad, all Republicans said that's bad. And when Donald Trump does something good, all Republicans say that's good. And that would include legislators. But these are the people who also have to negotiate with Trump. And there is a bit of practicality that has to take place here with regard to how you get policy done that you have promised your own constituents. This may be the last time in our modern history that Republicans run all the branches of government. And you expect Paul Ryan to blow that on a daily basis by talking about Donald Trump's dumb tweets when everybody already knows Donald Trump's tweets are dumb? Again, the media are really driving people toward Trump because a bunch of people on the right are simply going to respond to all of this by saying very simply, listen, you don't like Paul Ryan? We'll give you somebody who really doesn't care what you think. We'll give you Donald Trump. Okay, so before I go any further on this, and I want to get into the continuation of the probe into President Trump, first I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at Tommy John. So Tommy John is the 21st century clothing company famous for its unbelievably comfortable men's underwear and no wedgie guarantee. But now they've come out with their long anticipated women's line. They have the best pair or you'll ever wear or it's free guarantee, which means that if it's not the most comfortable underwear you've ever worn, Tommy John will foot the bill. Women have had it just as bad as men when it comes to underwear, if not worse than guys. They have to worry about pinching, squirming, tugging at uncomfortable undergarments. Well, now Tommy John has fixed it. They've reimagined women's underwear with the same patented designs and fabric technology that made them a household name. My wife has a couple of pair of Tommy Johns and she thinks they're just fantastic. Our female listeners can experience the fantastic 21st century comfort I've been talking about with regard to menswear. Now it's in women's wear as well. With Tommy John's luxuriously soft fabrics, there is no rolling, no bunching, no wedgies, no pilling, no visible panty lines. And of course, it's all backed by the best pair she'll ever wear or it's free guarantee. So ladies, stop worrying about your ill-fitting underwear and get some Tommy Johns. Hurry over to TommyJohn.com/Shapiro for 20% off your first order. That's TommyJohn.com/Shapiro for 20% off. Again, TommyJohn.com/Shapiro and use that /Shapiro so they know that we sent you. Again, it's the best underwear you'll ever wear or it's free. That is the guarantee over at Tommy John's. And there's a reason they have become so wildly popular. The reason they become so wildly popular is because they're awesome. Right? Their underwear is just that good. So go check it out. TommyJohn.com/Shapiro. You get 20% off again and use that /Shapiro so they know that we sent you. Okay, so again, I think that the focus on Paul Ryan from the left has been Paul Ryan is a bad guy because he didn't spend enough time ripping Trump up and down. And then if you watch Fox News and some of the commentators on Fox News, the problem with Paul Ryan is that he wasn't sufficiently obsequious to Donald Trump. He should have spent all of his time kissing Trump's ass more. Well, again, talking to the legislators, I can tell you this. There are a lot of legislators who don't like President Trump much personally, but they are keeping it under wraps for a couple of reasons. One, because they think that it is counterproductive to rip into a president they have to negotiate with. And number two, because they already figured that it is well known that President Trump has some character flaws that are pretty serious, and them mouthing off about it only allows the media to use them as a tool against the Republican Party more generally. That's why I think it's very important to draw a distinction in our minds in the conservative movement between our legislators and our thought leaders. These are not the same people. Now, this is a broader conversation that I think needs to be had. who are the thought leaders inside the Republican Party? Who are the thought leaders inside the conservative movement? Ever since the days of Woodrow Wilson, there's been an idea that the president is the thought leader of the country. Now, Barack Obama was the thought leader. George W. Bush was the thought leader. Bill Clinton was the thought leader. Ronald Reagan was the thought leader. But the reality is that the way that the founders drew up the Constitution, that the folks who were running all of our lawmaking were not supposed to be the quote-unquote thought leaders. They were supposed to be the implementers subject to the public will. And that meant that thought leaders were really supposed to exist, in many cases, outside of government. And many of the great thought leaders in American history were people who never served as president, who barely served in legislatures. Alexander Hamilton was somebody who never became president, obviously. He served inside a couple of administrations, but he was not somebody who was going to be president of the United States. Benjamin Franklin, another great thought leader. Right? There are many great thought leaders in American history, and those thought leaders have been as important or more important than people who are in positions of power. Looking to people whose job it is to write and rewrite legislation as the people who are going to speak to principle, I think is largely a mistake. And it's a mistake also for the base. The reason it's a mistake for the base is because when you listen to people like Paul Ryan talk or Mitch McConnell talk, and they talk about philosophy, their philosophy sounds a lot like yours in the base. Their philosophy sounds a lot like mine. This is why when I interviewed Paul Ryan a couple of weeks ago and he and I talked conservative philosophy, he sounds exactly like me with regard to spending priorities. And then a week later, he's pushing into law a $1.3 trillion omnibus spending package with which I assume he totally disagrees. Why? Because legislators have two jobs. One is to talk about ideas, but the more important job is for them to actually get legislation done. It is our job to have the ideas and to hold people responsible for those ideas. So don't look to politicians for being your thought leaders. Don't look to politicians to be the character advocates. Don't look to politicians to be these guys because they just won't be. I wish they would be. I wish that everyone in politics spent all their days talking about principle and worrying about principle and then openly stating when they were straying from principle in order to make legislative gambits. But that's not how this works. That's not how this works. And blaming Paul Ryan for how the system works, I think, is a mistake and also leads us to some pretty stupid conclusions about the kind of politicians that we should be electing instead of the kind of politicians who can get things done. And then it's up to us to toss them out if they don't get those things done or if they don't reflect our own ideology. Okay, meanwhile, President Trump's really, really angry, continues to be very, very upset about this FBI probe. And we are now finding out what exactly the FBI was looking for when it raided Michael Cohen's office. Michael Cohen, of course, was President Trump's personal lawyer, and the personal office of Michael Cohen was raided by the FBI. Apparently, one of the things that they were looking for were documents related to the Access Hollywood tape. So what exactly does Michael Cohen have to do with the Access Hollywood tape? As you recall, in the late days of the election, there was a tape that was broken from Access Hollywood in which President Trump was caught on a hot mic talking with Billy Bush and speaking about how he was a fond fan of grabbing women by the genitals, right? And how if famous people grabbed women by the genitals, they were totally fine with this. And of course, this was a big hubbub, and Donald Trump dropped 8 to 10 points in the polls, and everybody assumed his electoral chances were over, including me, right? All of this was a big hubbub at the time. But what does it have to do with Michael Cohen, right? What does that have to do with President Trump's lawyer? Well, the suggestion is now being made, and if this is really all this is going to be, honestly, if the FBI raided Michael Cohen on this basis, if the FBI raided Michael Cohen based on only the Stormy Daniels stuff, this is really weak tea. Okay, but here's what the suggestion is. The suggestion was made by Adam Schiff, the representative from, actually, I believe my district. He made that suggestion. He said, quote, "The reported seizure could be about whether Michael Cohen was making an effort to suppress release of that tape, much like he was trying to pay hush money for these other people, Stormy Daniels among others, to keep their stories out of the press during the presidential campaign, and whether that was a violation of the campaign finance laws not to report it." That's one possibility. It's also a possibility that they're looking at whether the Trump campaign and Michael Cohen had any role in the timing of the WikiLeaks of the Russia-stolen Podesta emails. You'll recall that the timeline that day was the Access Hollywood tapes were released at like 3:56 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. WikiLeaks dropped all of the Podesta emails. And so I guess the suggestion is now being made by Adam Schiff that Michael Cohen called up the Russians and said, listen, guys, I know you're going to release the Podesta emails anyway, but it'd be great if you could accelerate that release so that we can have a counter narrative. I find that exceedingly hard to believe. Now, it's quite possible that they're looking for evidence that Michael Cohen has spent a lot of time paying off various paramours and bad stories for Donald Trump. There's another story like that from The New Yorker today. The New Yorker printed a story that says that the National Enquirer paid $30,000 to a doorman of Donald Trump's who was trying to sell a story that said that Donald Trump had fathered a child out of wedlock in the late 80s. No one knows who that child would be. We can all speculate, and I guess we could do some fun speculation and just pray and hope that it wasn't Justin Bieber. But we also know is that the National Enquirer had actually done this to Stormy Daniels before, I believe, or was it? There's another Playboy bunny. There was somebody else that the National Enquirer had paid for a story, like Karen McDougal maybe, and then dropped the story and quashed the story. And so there was suggestion that this was also an in-kind contribution to the Trump campaign. If all that we've got here is in-kind contributions to the Trump campaign, I don't think that's enough for impeachment. I just don't. I think campaign finance violations are a big nothing when it comes to the American public imagination. Very few people care about campaign finance violations. People assume that there is a lot of corruption with regard to how campaign finance is done. And again, the Obama administration took in $2 million in 2008 of illegal campaign contributions, and they ended up paying like a $400,000 fine by 2012. There was no suggestion that that Obama should have been impeached over all of that. But again, this investigation is certainly a thorn in the side of President Trump. Steve Bannon is suddenly back, right? You remember Sloppy Steve, and President Trump ousted him to my great enjoyment. And Steve Bannon, who was the former White House chief strategist, who then went into the press and started ripping on President Trump and calling him stupid and calling Ivanka stupid and saying she was dumb as a brick and all this kind of stuff. Well, now Bannon is back, and he's trying to weasel his way back into Trump's good graces by doing what he does best, giving unbelievably crappy advice. According to the Washington Post, Steve Bannon has called up Trump, and he's pitching a plan to West Wing aides to try and end the special counsel probe, to end Robert Mueller's probe. The first step would be to fire Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein, of course, is the deputy attorney general who actually recused himself and appointed the special counsel. He still has the jurisdiction to fire Robert Mueller, but Rosenstein has been blamed for a lot of stuff by President Trump. So step one would be firing Rod Rosenstein. Step two would be stop cooperating with Mueller. And step three would be invoking executive privilege so that previous White House staffer interviews with Mueller become null and void, according to Bannon. So Bannon told the Washington Post, quote, the president wasn't fully briefed by his lawyers on the implications of not invoking executive privilege. It was a strategic mistake to turn over everything without due process. And executive privilege should be exerted immediately and retroactively. Okay, well, that is not a possibility. Okay, executive privilege only applies when you apply it. You can't retroactively apply executive privilege. You don't get to just declare willy-nilly executive privilege on stuff that's already been turned over to the FBI. At least that's a difficult legal case. So Bannon is trying to get Trump to fire Rod Rosenstein, which would end in presumably the firing of Mueller eventually. I'll explain why this is all a bad idea in just a second. First, I want to say thanks to our sponsors over at tripping.com. So if you're planning a vacation, and particularly if you have kids, or even if you don't, the reality is that you don't want to stay in a hotel room. Okay, hotel rooms, I've stayed in enough of them in my life. Let me tell you, the walls start to close in. And if you have a kid or more, the idea of staying in one bedroom with your children is not wonderful. What you actually want is vacation rental. Vacation rentals are just fantastic. I've done it with my wife in Big Bear, in Hawaii, and it is just terrific. The folks you need to go to are the folks over at tripping.com. It's one search that lets you compare every home from the world's top vacation rental sites in one place to find the best deal on your perfect vacation rental. Vacation rentals do offer more. We're talking more privacy, more space for everyone under one roof. You got a washer dryer so you don't have to pack as much. You have a kitchen so you can actually cook for yourself, even hot tubs, the comforts of home, and then some. So check out tripping.com. And again, they have rates up to 80% less than traditional hotel rooms. So if you're planning a spring break on the beach in Florida, tripping.com is the place for you. Or if you can't wait to swim in Lake Tahoe this summer, tripping.com is for you as well. And if you are just dreaming of sitting on the deck of a Smoky Mountains cabin, tripping.com can make that happen for you. Tripping.com/Shapiro, TRIPPING.com/Shapiro. Find your perfect vacation rental, tripping.com/Shapiro. And as I say, tripping.com, these vacation rentals, they are significantly better than hotels that you're going to stay in. You're going to stay in a hotel and you're going to feel cooped up, or you could have a palatial estate with the help of tripping.com for your vacation, tripping.com/Shapiro. Check it out. We use it for our vacations, and you should as well. Okay, so again, Steve Bannon is trying to get the president to fire Rod Rosenstein. That would be a disastrous idea. And not only that, there are other folks in the Republican Party who are doing the same. Newt Gingrich, I think, made just an asinine statement yesterday. He was talking about this FBI raid on Michael Cohen's offices. Now, you may not like the FBI raid on Michael Cohen's office. Alan Dershowitz certainly doesn't. And I think that there's some logistical reasons why you wouldn't like that raid. You might say, well, we haven't seen the warrant. We don't know exactly what they were looking for. This seems overbroad. We have to carefully protect attorney-client privilege. One of the most amazing things that I saw yesterday, this is really funny, is the New York Times saying, if Trump's innocent, why would he care about attorney-client privilege? Okay, that's like saying, if you don't have anything to hide, why don't you just let the police search your house every day? If you don't have anything to hide, why don't you just make your walls of glass? Okay, maybe because you actually like your privacy. Maybe because there's stuff that Trump has done with Cohen that's not illegal, but that's embarrassing. There are plenty of reasons why you would like attorney-client privilege if you're President Trump, even if you're not trying to cover up a crime. The New York Times, however, doesn't accept that. Again, Alan Dershowitz has said that he thinks that this search was overbroad, that since we don't know the basis of the search or what they're looking for, it seems like a wild jump to allow the FBI to raid the offices of Michael Cohen, who's the president's lawyer. I know that there are other talk show hosts who have been suggesting that it may not, in fact, even be a campaign finance violation if the president of the United States and Michael Cohen were to pay off Stormy Daniels. So what exactly would be the underlying crime? Nonetheless, what Newt Gingrich says here is so crazy that it's not good for President Trump's case. Here's what Newt Gingrich said about the FBI search.
We're supposed to have the rule of law. It ain't the rule of law when they kick in your door at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're faced with armed men and you have had no reason to be told you're going to have that kind of treatment. That's Stalin. That's the Gestapo in Germany. That shouldn't be the American FBI.
Okay, so no, it is not the Gestapo. No, it is not Stalin-esque. This is ridiculous. There is a full warrant process that was gone through. It went to a magistrate judge. It went to the U.S. District Attorney in the Southern District of New York, who was a Republican. So again, all of this is overstated. Now, does this mean that Mueller hasn't exceeded his brief here? I think Mueller pretty clearly has exceeded his brief in some ways. Do I think that this violation of attorney-client privilege is a wonderful idea? I'm not going to know that until I see more evidence. I'm happy to wait for more evidence instead of jumping to conclusions about where this is going. But one thing is clear, with all of the hubbub over it, with all of the lack of information, it's pretty obvious that President Trump is getting more and more agitated about this. And you can see that the media are goading him. You can actually see this. If you watch CNN, the media are goading President Trump. Over and over and over, they're goading President Trump. Right? Wolf Blitzer yesterday was spending most of the day talking about the president is probably in the Oval Office fulminating right now. The president is probably in the West Wing just angry and tweeting right now. And then they would have full panel conversations on how angry Trump was, which, of course, is designed to make Trump angrier because the media would love nothing better than for President Trump to fire Robert Mueller. Whoopi Goldberg sort of let the cat out of the bag here. She explained, yeah, you know what? I'd love to see this thing explode.
We're sitting around pontificating about something that hasn't happened, that's going on a lot of unnamed sources. So I don't think that we should get too far ahead of our skis. I do think everything you're saying about what would happen if he does fire Mueller, I've said, Lindsey Graham has said it's political suicide. Yeah. I 100% think there would be, I think there would actually be rioting in Washington, D.C. I think it would be at levels we haven't seen.
I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it would take levels that we can't comprehend since the Nixon era.
Okay, so she says that she would love it, right? That Whoopi is looking forward to the riots. The left wants this. They want the excuse to impeach President Trump. They want the excuse to say that this is full-scale obstruction of justice. And that's another reason why they've been pushing, for example, the James Comey book, which is coming out now. Lindsey Graham gets this, right? Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. He says to President Trump, please do not fire Mueller. If you fire Mueller, it's just going to backfire on you. It's a big mistake. Lindsey Graham is exactly correct about this. Even if you hate the Mueller investigation, even if you think the Mueller investigation sucks, even if you think that it's all a sham, even if you think they've got nothing on collusion, I think they have nothing on collusion, even if you think that there's no evidence of criminal activity yet, and I've seen no evidence of actual criminal activity yet, even if you believe all of that, firing Mueller is a big mistake, as Lindsey Graham says.
Mr. President, if you're watching, I think you're going to be fine unless you screw this up. Let the process play out. I don't believe you colluded with the Russians, but Mueller will soon tell us. The Cohen situation, I am convinced, has got nothing to do with Russia.
You don't think they're trying to squeeze Michael Cohen in order to, and there's obviously all kinds of correspondence that would have related to President Trump in the time, even before he was running, that would be in that office. And the president seems incensed about it based on what he's writing.
I understand the president feel like they're getting out of bounds here, but I want to tell you this. If Mueller was trying to squeeze Cohen, Mueller would have done it. This is something unconnected to Russia. I'm 100% convinced of that. And we'll see what Mueller finds. Let him do his job.
Okay, so, I think that Lindsey Graham is totally right about this. But again, the media are now in the business of trying to goad President Trump into making a presidency-ending mistake by firing Robert Mueller. One of the other ways they're doing this is by pushing James Comey's book. So let's start with this. James Comey, the former FBI director, is indeed a grandstander. President Trump called him a grandstander. President Trump suggested that he was in it for the attention. James Comey, it's pretty clear, is exactly that. He should have been fired after he went out front and said that Hillary Clinton did not violate the law even when she did. That was completely inappropriate. It was completely inappropriate for him to do a full press conference laying out all the reasons that Hillary Clinton had committed criminal violations and then to recommend to the DOJ in order to cover for then Attorney General Loretta Lynch and say that she shouldn't be prosecuted anyway. Then he came back a few days before the election, and he issued a letter about how he had reopened the Hillary email investigation, essentially. And then a couple days later, he shut it down again. So again, well done, James Comey. And then Trump should have fired him when he first came into office and said, listen, this guy's incompetent. This guy obviously loves the limelight. He loves being out front. You know, this is absurd. Instead, President Trump kept him around in some sort of misguided bid for, I guess, bipartisanship. And then he kept going to James Comey and he kept saying, listen, you know, FBI director, can you just say that I'm not under investigation? And Comey kept saying, you're not under investigation, but I'm not going to say it. And the reason I'm not going to say it is because if you do fall under investigation, then I'll have to announce it. And Trump said, okay, fine, so do that. Like, fine, but just say I'm not under investigation right now. Like, why is that so tough? Comey wouldn't do it, so Trump fired him. Totally within his purview. Okay, James Comey himself testified before Congress that his investigation was not impeded in any way by President Trump. That President Trump did not act well. That President Trump had asked him about loyalty. That President Trump had suggested that he drop the investigation of Mike Flynn, but at no point had Trump actually exerted pressure on Comey to do anything. Right? He said a couple of things, but that does not necessarily amount to exerting pressure, especially when he's the president of the United States, and he can actually do a lot of stuff within the purview of his executive power in order to quash an investigation if he wants to. Well, Comey waits a full year after his firing, and now he's coming out with this book all about how honorable and duty-bound he is. And now he'll answer all the questions. So we've been told that he was with for an hour with George Stephanopoulos on ABC News, and that's where he's launching his book. And we're supposed to believe that he is some sort of great honorable figure who's now going to answer all the questions. Well, he was in front of Congress and didn't answer like half their questions. So now all of a sudden he's a great honorable figure? And of course, the media are truly well and good excited about this. I mean, they are just, they're sweating bullets with excitement over how wonderful this is going to be. I'll show you just how excited they are in just a second. First, you're going to have to go over to dailywire.com and subscribe. For $9.99 a month, get a subscription to Daily Wire. When you do, the rest of my show live, the rest of Klavan's show live, the rest of Knowles' show live, and we have other goodies as well. Matt Walsh is doing a show now, so you can check that out too when you go to dailywire.com. All of that for $9.99 a month. Plus, you get to be part of the mailbag tomorrow. So if you want to ask me questions, now is the time to subscribe. With your annual subscription, you get all of those things. Plus, you get this right here, the Leftist Tears hot or cold tumbler, $99 a year, cheaper than the monthly subscription. You will enjoy it. And again, we ask you to subscribe because it is the best way to help us bring you good content every single day here at The Ben Shapiro Show. If you just want to listen later for free, feel free to go over to iTunes or SoundCloud or YouTube. Please subscribe. Please leave us a review. It always helps. We are the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast in the nation.